Marcus Bennett sat at the kitchen table long after the children had left for school, his eyes fixed on the half-empty mug of coffee cooling beside a spread of scattered bills and repair estimates. The early morning silence was broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirp of birds outside the window. In that quiet space, his mind wandered back to the early years of his marriage to Elena. Years filled with shared laughter, spontaneous road trips, and whispered promises under starlit skies. Now, after 12 years of what was supposed to be unwavering commitment, a persistent feeling of disquiet had taken root in his heart. Every morning, as he prepared for another day of the school where he managed the facilities, Marcus carried with him a sense of nostalgia and loss. Elena, once vibrant and full of life, seemed to drift further away with each passing day. It wasn't that she had become unkind or neglectful. Rather, subtle changes had crept into their daily routine. She began to return home later than expected, often her voice catching on a hushed phone conversation, before she hurriedly ended it, as if it were a secret too dangerous to share. At first, Marcus had brushed these moments aside, convincing himself they were the pressures of a demanding job at a rising marketing firm that left her little time to relax. But as the weeks turned into months, a pattern emerged, one that made his heart ache with the weight of uncertainty. Marcus remembered the day vividly. He had come home early from a routine maintenance check at the school, his mind already wandering to plans for a quiet dinner with Elena. Instead, he found the house in a state of subtle disarray. A misplaced receipt lay on the counter next to an envelope that bore an unfamiliar return address and the name Elena M. stamped on it in neat handwriting. It wasn't the sort of thing that should have been there, not when they shared every moment of their lives so openly. That small detail gnawed at him throughout the day, festering into a quiet storm of suspicion that he struggled to acknowledge. In the quiet hours of the morning, Marcus wrestled with conflicting emotions. He wanted to believe that the love they had nurtured over more than a decade was strong enough to weather the stress of career demands and the inevitability of change. Yet, a nagging voice in the back of his mind insisted that something more was amiss. Memories of Elena's soft smile, the light in her eyes when they had first met, clashed with the current distance she maintained. He recalled the days when she would enthusiastically recount her latest marketing campaigns or describe the creative brainstorming sessions with her colleagues. Now those stories were fewer and far between, replaced by brief, clipped responses and a guarded demeanor that Marcus couldn't quite understand. Even as he meticulously cleaned the tools in his maintenance room at the school, Marcus's thoughts kept returning to the quiet oddities at home. He remembered the unaccounted-for phone calls in the late evening and the way Elena's eyes would dart away when he casually mentioned a memory from their early days together. The warmth in their conversations had given way to brief exchanges that held little of the intimacy they once shared. Every little anomaly, every slight change in her routine, compounded into a larger picture that he was desperately trying to piece together. It wasn't that Marcus doubted Elena's integrity. He was a man who believed in trust, in the sacred vows that bound two people together. Yet, as he sat in the stillness of the morning, the echoes of trust that had once been his anchor now seemed like fragile glass, ready to shatter with the slightest provocation. The misplaced receipt and the mysterious package were not enough to prove wrongdoing, but they were enough to stir a growing anxiety within him, a fear that the foundation of their shared life was quietly crumbling. Marcus resolved to observe more carefully, to be attentive to the smallest details that might reveal the truth. He began to take mental notes of the times Elena left the house, the nature of her hurried conversations on the phone, and even the look in her eyes when she thought he wasn't watching. The routine of daily life became a series of silent investigations, each moment laden with the weight of unspoken questions. That morning, as he sipped the last of his cooling coffee, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the woman he loved was becoming a stranger. The man who had once eagerly planned surprises for Elena now found himself haunted by doubts. With a heavy heart, he silently vowed that he would uncover the reality behind the subtle changes, even if it meant facing a truth that could forever alter the life they had built together. In the stillness of that early hour, as the world outside began to stir, Marcus Bennett braced himself for a journey into the unknown. A journey into the echoes of trust, where every detail held the promise of either reconciliation or irrevocable betrayal. Marcus's heart pounded as he pulled into the upscale Midtown Hotel parking lot. The sleek exterior and polished glass facade exuded modern elegance, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within him. He had planned this surprise for weeks, a spontaneous gesture to whisk Elena away for a celebratory dinner after her long, grueling days at the marketing summit. Tonight, however, the thrill of anticipation was laced with apprehension, for every instinct in him warned that something might be off. Stepping out of his car, Marcus adjusted his suit jacket and took a deep breath before entering the grand lobby. The warm lighting and understated decor did little to ease his inner tension. At the reception desk, a friendly attendant greeted him with practiced professionalism. "Good evening, sir. How may I assist you?" the attendant asked, voice smooth and courteous. "I'm here to see Elena," Marcus replied, his tone steady despite the flutter of nerves beneath. "She's attending the marketing summit and is staying in room 312. I was told she left a spare key here for emergencies." The attendant nodded, checking the computer system with swift efficiency. After a brief pause, she handed him a small key on a sleek keyring. "Have a pleasant evening, Mr. Bennett," she said with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Marcus clutched the key tightly as he made his way to the elevator. The ride upward was silent, the hum of the elevator blending with the muted sounds of the hotel corridors. When the doors slid open on the third floor, he stepped into a quiet, dimly lit hallway, lined with plush carpeting and softly glowing sconces. Each door seemed to whisper secrets, and Marcus's thoughts churned with questions about what he might find. His footsteps were measured and deliberate as he approached room 312. With the spare key cool in his hand, he hesitated briefly before inserting it into the lock. A soft click confirmed that the door was unlocked, and Marcus pushed it open slowly, half expecting Elena to be surprised by his sudden presence. Instead, the room unfolded before him in quiet disarray, a room that had been carefully arranged for a business stay rather than the familiar warmth of their home. There, in the center of the room, Elena sat at a small desk, her attention entirely absorbed by a series of documents. As the door creaked open, she jerked upright, her eyes widening in startled alarm. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" she exclaimed, her voice a blend of shock and genuine surprise. "Surprise," Marcus managed, a weak smile tugging at his lips. He stepped further into the room, allowing himself a moment to absorb the scene. Elena quickly gathered her papers, shoving them into a neat pile as if to hide something from view. For a fleeting second, Marcus's heart leaped with relief at seeing her safe and sound, yet that relief was soon overshadowed by a creeping sense of unease. As she began to tidy the room, Marcus's gaze was drawn to a closed envelope resting on the corner of the desk. It was marked with a single word: private. His curiosity compelled him forward, his mind racing with possibilities. In that moment, the planned celebration dissolved into a haze of conflicted emotions. Elena's surprised expression, tinged with guilt and apprehension, was quickly replaced by an attempt to mask the underlying tension with a forced smile. Before he could voice any questions, a sharp knock at the door startled them both. Elena quickly excused herself, leaving Marcus alone with his swirling thoughts and the enigmatic envelope. The room felt colder now, the soft hum of the air conditioner a stark reminder of the distance that had crept between them. Marcus reached out and picked up the envelope, turning it over in his hands. Its plain exterior offered no clues, yet the simple act of it being there was enough to deepen his suspicion. Standing there, in the quiet aftermath of the unexpected encounter, Marcus felt a torrent of emotions. Relief that Elena was physically unharmed warred with a sinking doubt that her life might be slipping away into a realm of secrets he was not privy to. The planned surprise had transformed into an interrogation of his own heart, a questioning of the truths he thought he knew about the woman he loved. As he replaced the envelope on the desk, Marcus realized that the evening was no longer about celebration. Instead, it had become a turning point, a moment when every polite smile and courteous gesture might conceal deeper, hidden truths. With a heavy heart and a mind filled with uncertainty, Marcus left the room, stepping back into the softly lit corridor. The hotel, with all its understated glamour, now felt like a labyrinth of secrets, each shadow whispering hints of betrayal. In that dimly lit hallway, Marcus Bennett vowed silently that tonight, amidst the polished veneer and gentle smiles, he would begin to unravel the mystery that had taken root in his once unshakable trust. Later that evening, Marcus returned home feeling as though he were still caught in the echoes of the day's events. The quiet of the house felt oppressive now, as if every shadow held a secret waiting to be revealed. He set his briefcase down in the entryway and stepped into the living room, where the fading light of dusk filtered through the curtains. The room, usually a sanctuary of comfort and familiarity, now seemed to mirror the turmoil inside him. Marcus sank into his favorite armchair, the leather worn soft by years of use. The silence of the space was punctuated only by the distant hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the settling house. His mind replayed every moment from earlier at the hotel, the polite smiles, the unexpected envelope marked private, and the fleeting expressions on Elena's face. Each detail swirled together in a chaotic montage that left him feeling both numb and enraged. Desperate to make sense of his inner storm, Marcus decided to take a methodical approach. He rose and walked towards the small desk in the corner of the living room, where Elena's travel bag lay forgotten from a recent trip. It was an unassuming bag, dark and practical, its contents a mystery that now beckoned him with silent accusation. With hesitant hands, he unzipped the bag and began to sift through its contents. Bills, a makeup pouch, and various personal items emerged from the depths of the bag, each one seemingly innocent. But tucked away beneath a folded scarf, his fingers brushed against a small rectangular packet that felt out of place. Marcus unfolded the packet carefully, his breath catching in his throat. It was a box of condoms. The discovery sent a jolt of disbelief through him, mingled with a deep aching sorrow. Their life together had been built on shared trust and an unspoken understanding, one that had led him to make a personal decision, a vasectomy, to cement their commitment and the certainty of their future. This box of condoms, hidden away in a bag that was supposed to be filled only with the necessities of travel, shattered that certainty. He held the box as if it were a physical embodiment of betrayal. His mind raced, recalling the countless late nights when Elena's excuses about overtime or client meetings had seemed plausible. But now, every evasive text message and every hurried phone call took on a sinister meaning. The evidence before him, so small and yet so damning, forced him to re-examine every detail of the past months. The unexplained absences, the subtle changes in her tone, the way she had grown distant and secretive. In the quiet of the living room, Marcus felt an overwhelming urge to confront her immediately. Yet even as anger burned in his chest, a rational, cautious part of him urged restraint. He knew that impulsively confronting Elena in this state might lead to an emotional explosion that would leave him with only more questions and pain. Instead, he resolved to seek a clearer understanding, to gather undeniable proof that would leave no room for doubt. The discovery of the condoms was a crucial piece of evidence, but he needed to know more, to uncover the full extent of what had been hidden from him. Leaving the travel bag carefully as he had found it, Marcus moved to his study, a room he had long considered his refuge for introspection. The study was quiet, filled with the soft glow of a desk lamp and the comforting clutter of books and old photographs. He sat at his desk, the weight of the evidence heavy on his mind, and pulled out his notebook. With slow, deliberate strokes, he began jotting down every inconsistency he had noticed over the past few months. Late returns from work, the quick dismissals of her phone calls, and the vague, unconvincing explanations, all of it coalesced into a narrative of deception that he could no longer ignore. Marcus reread each line he had written, his hand trembling as he struggled to comprehend how the woman he loved could have strayed so far from the person he once knew. The familiar scent of old paper and ink mingled with the bitter tang of betrayal as he wrestled with his emotions. Every memory now carried the weight of suspicion, each happy recollection marred by the possibility that it had been built on lies. The clock ticked steadily on, marking the slow passage of time as Marcus sat in a battle of heart and mind. He was torn between confronting Elena with the evidence immediately and digging deeper to understand the full extent of her betrayal. His heart ached at the thought of shattering the fragile remnants of trust that had defined their years together. Yet the need for truth was too powerful to ignore. In that dimly lit study, Marcus found himself at a crossroads. The box of condoms lay like a silent testimony to the secrets that had been kept from him, and every unanswered question fueled a growing determination to uncover the truth. As he closed his notebook and looked out the window at the darkening sky, he knew that the decision he faced would change everything. With every passing moment, the whispers of betrayal grew louder, urging him to take the next step in a journey that promised both painful revelations and the possibility of an uncertain new beginning. Marcus sat at his desk late that afternoon, the remnants of his troubled thoughts scattered across his mind like loose pages of an unwritten story. The evidence he had discovered weighed heavily on him, and the uncertainty of what to do next left him restless and unsure. With the box of condoms still vivid in his memory, and every past inconsistency now re-examined under a harsh light, Marcus knew he needed someone who could help him navigate the murky waters of betrayal and heartache. He reached for his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found a familiar name, Vivian Cole. Their college days had been filled with laughter and dreams, and though life had taken them on separate paths, Marcus remembered Vivian as someone both compassionate and sharp-witted, a person who had endured her own share of heartbreak and emerged stronger for it. A few days later, Marcus found himself walking into a small, warmly lit cafe tucked away on a quiet side street. The aroma of freshly ground coffee beans mingled with the soft murmur of quiet conversations, creating an atmosphere that felt safe and intimate. He spotted Vivian seated near a window, her presence immediately recognizable, even after all these years. She looked much the same, confident yet gentle, her eyes reflecting a mixture of empathy and determination. Marcus approached hesitantly, and she rose to greet him with a warm smile and an inviting hug that immediately put him at ease. They sat down at a small table by the window, and as they exchanged pleasantries, Marcus's guarded expression began to soften. Vivian could sense that something was weighing on him, and she encouraged him to share without fear of judgment. With a deep breath, Marcus began to recount the events of the past weeks, the subtle changes in Elena's behavior, the mysterious receipt and package, the unexpected envelope at the hotel, and most damning of all, the discovery of the condoms hidden in her travel bag. His voice wavered at times as he described the growing pattern of evasions, the late nights, and the way Elena had become a stranger behind a mask of routine excuses. Vivian listened intently, her eyes never leaving his face. When Marcus paused, she leaned forward gently and asked, "Marcus, are you certain about what you've seen? Sometimes our minds can play tricks on us when we're hurting." Her question was not meant to undermine him, but to help him reflect on the situation with a clear head. Marcus hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I wish I could be sure, but every little detail I've noticed now seems to point in the same direction. I've been trying to piece it all together, and I'm afraid the picture is not what I want it to be." As the conversation continued, Vivian's tone grew both empathetic and pragmatic. She spoke of her own experiences with heartbreak and betrayal, how she had once been in a similar position of painful uncertainty. "Marcus," she said softly, "I understand how devastating it can be when the person you love begins to hide parts of themselves from you. But before you do anything rash, you need concrete evidence, something that isn't open to interpretation or misreading emotions. It's important that you have proof, not just suspicions, so that you can make decisions from a place of clarity rather than anger. Her words resonated deeply with Marcus. He had been teetering on the edge of confrontation, his emotions raw and his heart heavy with the burden of betrayal. Vivian continued, "If you confront Elena now with just these pieces of evidence, you may end up with a confrontation that turns everything into chaos. I've seen it happen. You deserve to know the truth, and you deserve to act in a way that protects your dignity and your future." She paused, letting her advice sink in before adding, "Perhaps you should consider gathering more indisputable proof. I have some contacts and resources from my work that might help you verify your suspicions legally. I can help you set up a way to document everything properly." Marcus listened, feeling a glimmer of relief amid the storm of his emotions. Here was someone who not only understood his pain, but also offered a practical way forward, a partnership that could help him avoid the pitfalls of a purely emotional response. As the conversation unfolded, Vivian's suggestion to take a measured, evidence-based approach began to take shape in his mind. She stressed the importance of staying calm, of not letting the raw hurt cloud his judgment, and of considering the long-term implications for both his emotional well-being and the stability of his family. Their dialogue meandered through memories of their shared past and the ways in which life had taught them both resilience and caution. Vivian's compassionate eyes and steady voice provided Marcus with a much-needed anchor. By the time their coffee cups were nearly empty and the soft glow of the evening had settled over the cafe, Marcus felt a sense of clarity he had not experienced in weeks. He realized that while the betrayal cut deeply, it did not have to define his future. With Vivian's unexpected offer of guidance, he felt empowered to take the next steps, not as a man driven solely by pain, but as someone determined to reclaim his truth through careful, deliberate action. Standing outside the cafe, Marcus took a long, steadying breath. The chill of the evening air did little to cool the fire of resolve now kindling within him. He knew the road ahead would be fraught with difficult decisions, but with Vivian by his side, he felt ready to face the labyrinth of legal and emotional challenges that lay before him. In that moment, amidst the quiet hum of the city night, an unlikely partnership was born, one that promised to transform betrayal into the first step toward healing and eventual renewal. Marcus spent the next few days transforming his home into a silent witness to Elena's secret life. With Vivian's guidance still echoing in his mind, he began by setting up a discreet camera in the living room. A relic from his days, fixing up school equipment that he had long kept in a dusty cabinet. He chose a spot behind an innocuous bookshelf, where the lens could capture every entrance and exit without drawing attention. He connected the camera to a small digital recorder hidden inside a decorative box on the mantelpiece, ensuring that every movement would be automatically logged. Alongside the camera, Marcus created a detailed logging system. Every time Elena left or returned home, he scribbled down the time and any peculiar details he could observe: an extra jacket on a cool night, a hurried glance at her phone, or even the sound of hushed conversations over the phone in the dead of night. Each note was a piece of a puzzle that he hoped, one day, would reveal the complete picture of her betrayal. Over the following days, the house became both sanctuary and covert observation post. Marcus moved about his daily routine with a heavy heart, all the while meticulously checking the recorder and updating his log. He found himself staring at the monitor more often than usual, replaying the recorded footage with a mix of dread and determination. Every time the clock struck a late hour, his pulse quickened as he awaited evidence that might validate his worst fears. At first, the recording showed little more than Elena going about her usual routines, preparing dinner, reading in the living room, or making quiet phone calls in her study. Yet, as the days passed, Marcus noticed subtle deviations. There were moments when she would leave the house at irregular hours, her footsteps echoing down the hallway with an urgency that was not typical of her once predictable schedule. On several nights, he caught fleeting images of her hurriedly glancing over her shoulder, as if to confirm she was not being followed. The tension in the house grew palpable. Marcus began to feel like a silent guardian, the unseen observer of a life he no longer recognized. Every creak in the floorboards, every unexpected sound, sent his heart racing as he questioned whether he was overanalyzing or if there was truly something sinister unfolding. Despite the mounting anxiety, he remained resolute, knowing that each recorded frame was a step toward the truth he so desperately needed. Then, one night, as Marcus reviewed the footage in his study, his eyes were drawn to a segment he had not noticed before. It was a recording from a late hour, a time when Alina was expected to be asleep. The timestamp was uncharacteristic, the image grainy in the low light. Slowly, the scene unfolded. Alina opened the front door and stepped out into the darkened street. Moments later, a sleek black car pulled up. The car's window rolled down, and out stepped a sharply dressed man, his demeanor confident and calm. He moved with an air of familiarity as he approached Alina. For several long minutes, the two exchanged hushed words. The camera, though its quality was less than perfect, captured gestures that spoke of intimacy, a lingering touch on her arm, a smile that was too knowing to be merely friendly. Then, as abruptly as they had met, they parted ways. Alina returned home, leaving the man standing by the car before it sped away into the night. Marcus felt as if the ground had fallen away beneath him. His heart pounded in his ears as he rewound the footage several times, each playback confirming what his deepest suspicions had long whispered. The man, with his impeccable suit and assured manner, was the same colleague he had seen with Alina at the hotel, a figure who had been present during that unnerving encounter in room 312. Now, on the recorder, it was undeniable. This was not a fleeting flirtation or an innocent meeting. It was evidence of a relationship that had crossed the boundaries of mere workplace camaraderie. As the reality of the footage sank in, Marcus's breath caught. The pain was sharp, a physical ache that radiated through his chest. The betrayal he had feared was now laid bare in black and white images. Yet even as his heart broke, he felt a grim sense of resolve hardening within him. With this irrefutable evidence, he could no longer be caught in a spiral of doubts and half-truths. The proof was undeniable, and it provided him with the strength to face the impending confrontation. Marcus spent the rest of that night in a state of somber reflection. He rewatched the segment, each viewing reinforcing the magnitude of what he had uncovered. The camera, a silent witness to the clandestine meetings, had become the instrument of his painful enlightenment. In the quiet aftermath, as the first light of dawn crept through the window, Marcus felt a strange mix of sorrow and determination. He now held the key to unraveling the tangled web of lies and deception that had invaded his once tranquil life. With the evidence safely stored and his log meticulously updated, Marcus knew that there was no turning back. The path ahead was fraught with difficult decisions and heart-wrenching confrontations, but he had taken the first crucial step. In the dim light of his study, surrounded by the silent testimony of hidden cameras and written notes, Marcus Bennett steeled himself for the future. He vowed that no matter how much his heart might ache, he would confront the truth head-on, armed with the knowledge that every secret captured on tape brought him closer to reclaiming his life and dignity. Marcus sat at a corner table in the cozy bistro, the low hum of conversation and the clink of silverware serving as a stark counterpoint to the storm raging inside him. The familiar setting of the restaurant, once a sanctuary of shared joy and intimate conversation, now felt alien as he awaited Alina's arrival. His hands were steady on the table, though his heart pounded with anticipation and dread. Across from him lay a folder containing the evidence, the meticulously gathered photographs, recordings, and logs that bore witness to the betrayal he had long suspected. When Alina entered, her face initially lit up with the warm smile Marcus remembered. A brief moment of their past intimacy flashed across his mind. For a fleeting second, he almost allowed himself to believe in the woman he once adored. But as she approached and sat down, her eyes betrayed a flicker of uncertainty, as if she sensed the gravity of the moment. Marcus cleared his throat softly, breaking the fragile silence that had settled between them. "Alina," he began, his voice calm but firm. "We need to talk." His tone was measured, carrying both the weight of hurt and the resolve of a man determined to reclaim his dignity. Alina's smile faltered, and she hesitated before replying. "Marcus, what is it?" Her voice wavered slightly as she tried to mask the anxiety beneath. Without preamble, Marcus slid the folder across the table. "I've been gathering evidence," he said quietly, his eyes locked on hers. "I know about the late nights, the hurried departures, and the meetings you've been having. I have proof that goes beyond my suspicions." He opened the folder, revealing photographs from the hotel, copies of logged entries, and a recording that captured a conversation between Alina and a man who, to Marcus, was no stranger. Alina's eyes widened as she scanned the pages and images, her expression shifting from shock to a dawning realization of what was unfolding. "Marcus, she began, her voice faltering as she sought an explanation. He interrupted gently. "I need you to be honest with me, Alina. What is this all about? Is it just a harmless flirtation, as you might claim, or is there something more?" His tone was laced with both pain and determination. For a long, tense moment, silence reigned between them as the weight of the evidence hung in the air. Alina's facade wavered, and she looked down at her hands, as if they held the answers she could not bring herself to speak. "It wasn't meant to hurt you," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "It started as a harmless conversation, a way to feel noticed, to feel appreciated." Her eyes flickered up, meeting his with a mix of regret and defensiveness. "I never intended for it to become what it did," she continued, her tone shaky as she tried to justify her actions. Marcus felt the ache of betrayal intensify, but he maintained his composure. "A harmless conversation. Alina, these meetings, these secretive calls, they go far beyond a simple flirtation. I have footage of you with him, evidence that you've been more than just friendly." His voice, though calm, carried a tremor of hurt that resonated in the quiet space between them. Tears welled in Alina's eyes as the truth she had tried so desperately to hide began to crumble under the scrutiny of his gaze. I felt so alone," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I tried to fill a void that I didn't even fully understand. You were so wrapped up in your work and the routines, and I felt invisible." Her admission was raw and unfiltered, revealing the deep-seated longing for connection that had driven her to seek solace elsewhere. Marcus's heart ached at the vulnerability in her voice, yet the betrayal still stung sharply. "I always thought we were in this together," he said softly. "I believed in us, in the trust we built over 12 years. How could you let it come to this?" His words were not just accusations but a plea for an explanation, for some remnant of the love they once shared. Alina's voice cracked as she tried to explain. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry that I made you feel like this. It wasn't planned to hurt you. I lost myself somewhere along the way." Her eyes brimmed with tears, and the restaurant's soft lighting seemed to highlight every line of pain on her face. The conversation turned heavy with long pauses and trembling silences. Marcus listened as Alina attempted to justify her actions, citing loneliness and a desperate need for attention. With each word, his resolve hardened. He could no longer allow the veneer of their past to mask the deep fissures that had formed between them. "I can't ignore what I know, Alina," he said quietly, his voice carrying the finality of a decision made after long nights of contemplation. "I deserve honesty, and I deserve a future built on trust, not secrets." In that charged moment, both sat exposed. Marcus, with his heart shattered yet resolute in reclaiming his self-respect, and Alina, with a raw mixture of remorse, confusion, and a profound sense of loss for the relationship they once had. The soft murmur of the bistro and the distant clatter of dishes bore silent witness to the unraveling of their marriage. The confrontation had stripped away any illusions, leaving only the painful truth laid bare on the table between them. The days following the confrontation were heavy with silence and tension, and the home that once echoed with laughter now felt like a stage for unspoken anguish. Marcus sat in the dimly lit living room one evening, listening to the muted sounds of life unfolding around him. Lily and Owen played quietly in their rooms, unaware of the storm that had descended on their family. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of the wind against the window, reminded him of the fragile state of their lives. He found himself repeatedly questioning whether the love that had sustained them for so long could ever be restored. Marcus tried to explain the situation to Lily in gentle, careful words, but the conversation always ended in confusion and tears. When she asked why Mommy was sad, he could only offer vague reassurances that sometimes adults have difficult days. The truth was too raw, too complicated for her young mind to grasp without causing further pain. Similarly, with Owen, every attempt to mask his own hurt with forced smiles only deepened the distance between him and his son. The laughter that once filled their home had been replaced by a strained quiet that made every moment feel like an impending farewell. Elena, for her part, oscillated wildly between moments of tearful remorse and curt, defensive outbursts. There were mornings when she would sit at the kitchen table, her eyes red and voice soft as she apologized, pleading for forgiveness that she knew she did not deserve. On other days, her tone hardened into stubborn denial, as if refusing to accept the full weight of her actions. Her presence in the household became unpredictable, sometimes filled with a desperate need to mend things, and other times cold and distant, as if she were already preparing herself for an inevitable departure. Marcus found himself caught in the middle of a maelstrom of emotions. Every time he looked into Elena's eyes, he saw not only regret, but also the stubborn defiance of a woman who believed that she could somehow salvage the remnants of their once beautiful union. At night, as he lay awake listening to the silence of an empty room, his mind would race with memories of better times, a family dinner filled with shared stories and laughter, the comfort of a loving embrace, the sense of belonging that he once felt so strongly. Now those memories seemed like relics of a past life, impossible to recapture. The weight of responsibility for both his own emotional well-being and that of his children pressed down on him with unrelenting force. He questioned whether holding on to a relationship that had become a source of daily pain was worth the risk of further fracturing his family. In the quiet solitude of the early morning, as the house still slept, and the only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator, Marcus came to a painful realization. The trust that had once been the bedrock of their marriage was irreparably broken. Each day that passed without a true mutual effort to rebuild that trust only deepened the chasm between them. It was in one such early morning moment that Marcus finally acknowledged the hard truth. The love they once shared had been replaced by a web of hurt, denial, and betrayal that could no longer be untangled. The decision weighed on him like a physical burden. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched coffee that had grown cold, and recognized that the future they had both envisioned was now obscured by uncertainty and despair. The idea of divorce, once unthinkable, began to surface as the only viable path toward healing and renewal, both for himself and for his children. Marcus's heart ached at the thought of ending a 12-year union, yet he also felt an undeniable pull toward the possibility of a life where honesty, even if painful, could pave the way for true recovery. With every silent tick of the clock, he felt his resolve harden. He knew that continuing in a relationship built on secrets and half-truths would only lead to further damage. In that quiet, sorrowful morning, Marcus made the agonizing decision that divorce was the only way to begin the process of healing, a decision that would tear him apart even as it promised the chance for eventual peace. As the sun began to rise, casting pale light through the kitchen window, Marcus sat alone with his thoughts. The sound of a door closing somewhere in the house signaled that another day had begun, a day that would be filled with difficult conversations and quiet grief. Yet beneath the weight of his despair, there flickered a small ember of hope, a hope that, someday, the wounds of betrayal might heal enough for him to reclaim his dignity and find a path forward for himself and his children. Marcus sat in the sterile, high-ceilinged office of the divorce attorney, his hands clasped tightly around a folder filled with documents and evidence. The room's clinical atmosphere contrasted sharply with the turmoil of his heart. Across the polished wooden desk, Mr. Daniels, a seasoned attorney with a calm, measured tone, reviewed the files Marcus had compiled. The weight of each document, the photographs, the recorded conversations, the log of inconsistencies, seemed to punctuate the gravity of the situation. Marcus's eyes, red-rimmed from sleepless nights, met Mr. Daniels's steady gaze as he explained the painstaking process that lay ahead. "Mr. Bennett," the attorney began, his voice even and reassuring, "what you have here is a comprehensive record of your claims. We will need to file for divorce and ensure that every piece of evidence is properly admitted in court." Marcus nodded silently, feeling a mixture of relief and dread. The idea of exposing the intimate details of his once private life to public scrutiny was daunting, yet it also promised a path to reclaiming his dignity. Over the next few weeks, Marcus found himself immersed in a whirlwind of legal consultations and document preparations. Every morning, he would review depositions and organize his evidence, often working late into the night. Mr. Daniels guided him through the intricacies of legal procedure, explaining that the discovery process would reveal even more about Alina's repeated deceptions. In one tense meeting, Mr. Daniels presented newly uncovered emails and text messages that further corroborated Marcus's claims. The documents painted a picture of a systematic betrayal, with Alina's professional life intertwining dangerously with her personal indiscretions. The revelations were damning, and Marcus felt both vindicated and heartbroken by the extent of the betrayal. As the case progressed, Marcus was called to testify in several pretrial hearings. The courtroom was a stark, intimidating environment, filled with hushed whispers and the sharp rustle of paper. In one such session, Marcus took the stand, his voice steady despite the raw emotions bubbling beneath. He recounted, in meticulous detail, the evidence he had gathered and the timeline of events leading to the present moment. His testimony was met with tense exchanges from Alina's attorney, who sought to undermine his credibility by questioning the validity of his evidence. Yet, Marcus remained resolute, his words clear and unyielding, as he defended the truth he had uncovered. During a particularly heated deposition, an opposing attorney attempted to portray Alina's actions as mere miscommunications, insisting that the evidence was circumstantial and open to interpretation. Marcus, however, recounted the moments captured on camera and the irrefutable nature of the recordings. His voice, though measured, carried an undercurrent of pain that resonated with the judge and the jury alike. The courtroom drama unfolded with a mix of raw emotion and formal legal debate, each side presenting its case with precision. The tension in the room was palpable, and every pause in the proceedings allowed the full impact of Marcus's revelations to sink in. Outside the courthouse, Marcus found solace in unexpected moments. Vivian was a constant presence, her supportive words and gentle demeanor providing a much-needed counterbalance to the coldness of the legal battles. In the quiet moments between court sessions, she would join him for a walk or a coffee, their conversations drifting from legal strategy to reflections on life and healing. Her steady presence reminded him that while the courtroom might strip away the veneer of their former life, there remained a possibility for rebuilding something new and honest. As the legal process advanced, public attention began to focus on the case. Alina's professional reputation was put under a microscope as details of her indiscretions surfaced. News of the scandal spread through industry circles, affecting not only her career, but also casting a shadow over the corporate world in which she had once been admired. Marcus felt a bitter satisfaction at the unfolding of events, yet he also bore the burden of having his personal life exposed so publicly. The exposure was painful, but it also served as a stark reminder that the truth must be told, no matter how harsh it may be. Throughout it all, Marcus clung to the guidance of Mr. Daniels and the unwavering support of Vivian. Their counsel helped him navigate the labyrinth of legal formalities, while their friendship began to kindle a cautious hope that healing was possible beyond the courtroom. The formal proceedings were grueling and impersonal, yet in the quiet moments after a long day in court, Marcus allowed himself to imagine a future where he could rebuild his life free of betrayal. Standing in the cold light of a post-hearing morning, Marcus felt both the scars of the past and the fragile promise of a new beginning. The legal battles had stripped away the remnants of the old life, exposing painful truths and setting the stage for a process of renewal. With every testimony, every document, and every support from those who cared, Marcus realized that the journey through the legal system was not just about vindication. It was also about reclaiming his self-respect and preparing for the possibility of a future defined by honesty and hope. Marcus stepped out of the courthouse for the last time with a heavy heart, but a determined stride. The divorce was finalized, and as the reality set in, he felt both the weight of loss and the promise of a new beginning. The familiar streets of his neighborhood had not changed, yet everything felt different. Each step he took felt like leaving behind the ruins of a once-cherished life and moving toward the uncertain horizon of renewal. Every morning now began with a quiet ritual that centered on his children. He drove Lily and Owen to school, their laughter in the backseat a bittersweet reminder of what had been lost and what could still be nurtured. At the school parking lot, he would share a small smile with his daughter and a nod with his son, silent assurances that despite the upheaval at home, he would always be there to guide and protect them. In these moments, Marcus discovered a reservoir of strength that he had not known existed. Their innocence and resilience became the anchors of his recovery, prompting him to embrace the challenge of redefining his identity beyond the confines of a shattered marriage. At home, the house that once brimmed with tension now slowly transformed into a space for healing. Marcus rearranged furniture, repainted walls, and even created a small workshop in the garage where he returned to a long-forgotten hobby, woodworking. The rhythmic sound of saws and the scent of freshly cut timber brought him solace. With every piece of furniture he built or repaired, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a tangible reminder that out of destruction, something beautiful could be created. Marcus also began attending a support group for individuals navigating the aftermath of divorce. In the softly lit community center, he listened to others share their stories of heartbreak and hope. As he spoke about his own journey, his voice trembled at first, but then grew steadier with each session. The support and understanding he found there became a beacon in his darkest moments. He learned that the path to healing was not linear. It was filled with setbacks and small victories, each one a step toward reclaiming his self-respect. In the midst of rebuilding his life, a gentle warmth began to emerge in the form of Vivian. Their earlier connection, forged in the quiet understanding of shared pain, slowly evolved into something more tender and hopeful. They met for coffee on lazy Sunday mornings, discussing books, art, and their dreams for the future. Vivian's presence was steady and comforting, a reminder that even after the deepest betrayal, there could be a space for trust and genuine care. Their conversations were unhurried and filled with a cautious optimism that made Marcus believe that he was capable of loving again, even if it was a love built on the foundation of resilience and new beginnings. Weekends became a time of renewal for Marcus. He took Lily and Owen to the park, where they played frisbee and picnicked under the open sky. These moments of simple joy served as a counterbalance to the legal battles and emotional turmoil of the past months. As he watched his children run freely, Marcus felt a stirring of hope, a belief that life could be rebuilt, piece by piece, with patience and persistence. Evenings were now quieter, filled with reflective solitude rather than acrimonious silence. Marcus often sat at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in hand, pondering the lessons learned from the betrayal and the subsequent legal battles. He scribbled notes in a worn journal, mapping out small goals for the future, reconnecting with old friends, volunteering at the local community center, and perhaps even exploring a creative project that had long lain dormant. Each goal was a tiny step away from the pain of the past and toward a future defined by potential and self-discovery. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus began to see the scars of betrayal not as symbols of defeat, but as markers of survival and transformation. The memories of his fractured marriage still lingered, but they no longer held the power to dictate his every emotion. With every carefully planned school run, every crafted piece of wood, and every heartfelt conversation with Vivian, Marcus felt himself slowly emerging from the ruins. He had begun to rebuild not just a home, but his identity, one that was informed by the pain of the past yet enriched by the hope of a brighter future. In the soft glow of a late afternoon, as Marcus walked through the neighborhood with Lily and Owen by his side, he paused to look at the clear blue sky. The burden of the past was still there, but it was now tempered by the promise of renewal. He realized that while the journey ahead would be long and filled with challenges, each step he took was a step toward reclaiming his life and his dignity. With cautious optimism and a heart that had learned to mend, Marcus Bennett embraced the future. A future that, though scared by betrayal, was filled with the potential for genuine happiness and new beginnings. Epilogue. Marcus sat on a weathered wooden bench by the lake, the setting sun casting long shadows across the rippling water. The gentle lapping of waves provided a soothing counterpoint to the storm of memories that played in his mind. Lily and Owen were nearby, their laughter carrying on the breeze as they chased one another along the water's edge, their carefree joy a stark contrast to the tumultuous journey Marcus had endured. In that quiet moment, with the sky awash in hues of orange and pink, he allowed himself to reflect on the path that had brought him here. He recalled the early days of his marriage when every morning was filled with hope and every evening with the promise of shared dreams. The memories of whispered promises, spontaneous road trips, and quiet moments of intimacy were now intermingled with the pain of betrayal. Marcus had once believed that trust was unbreakable, a bond that could weather any storm. Yet the subtle signs of discontent, the late nights, the secretive phone calls, and the unexpected discoveries had slowly eroded that trust until it lay in ruins. It had been a long, painful journey, from the first hints of suspicion to the heart-wrenching confrontation, from the arduous legal battles that laid bare every hidden truth to the quiet, sorrowful realization that their once unified life could no longer be salvaged. As the sun dipped lower, Marcus pulled out a small, worn notebook from his jacket pocket, a journal that had become his silent confidant throughout the months of despair and gradual healing. He opened it to a blank page and began to write a letter addressed to his younger self. With careful, deliberate strokes, he penned words of hard-earned wisdom. Dear younger me, never take for granted the fragile nature of trust. Cherish every moment of genuine connection, but always be mindful that love is as delicate as it is powerful. The pain you feel now is real, but it will forge a strength within you that you never knew existed. Learn to forgive, not for the sake of the other, but for your own healing. Embrace the changes that life brings, and know that every ending paves the way for a new beginning. He paused, his pen hovering over the paper as memories of his darkest hours mingled with the first tentative steps toward recovery. The scars of betrayal were deep, yet they were also reminders of his resilience. Each tear shed, every moment of heartache had contributed to the person he had become, a man who had faced the truth head-on and emerged with a clearer sense of self. In the distance, the sound of Lily's laughter and Owen's playful shouts stirred something tender within him. The children had been his anchor throughout the ordeal, their innocent joy and unspoken trust guiding him back from the brink. Marcus felt a warmth in his chest as he recalled the simple yet profound moments of parenting, holding his daughter's hand as they walked to school, the silent nods exchanged with his son, and the unbreakable bond that had been his motivation to rebuild his life. A gentle breeze swept over the lakeside, carrying with it the promise of renewal. Marcus looked toward the horizon, where the last rays of sunlight mingled with the soft glow of dusk. The landscape before him was both a reminder of what had been lost and a canvas for what could still be created. It was in that timeless moment of reflection that Marcus realized his journey was far from over. Though the wounds of infidelity and betrayal had left indelible marks, they had also paved the way for growth, resilience, and the emergence of a new identity. One not defined by past betrayals, but by the strength to move forward. In that quiet solitude, Marcus allowed himself a cautious smile as he thought of Vivian. Their connection, which had begun as a lifeline during his darkest days, had gradually deepened into something tender and hopeful. The support she had offered was more than practical guidance. It was the gentle affirmation that life could offer second chances, and that love, in its truest form, was capable of healing even the deepest wounds. As the sky turned a deep indigo and the first stars began to shimmer above the lake, Marcus closed his notebook and tucked it safely away. He stood up slowly, feeling both the weight of his past and the lightness of his newfound resolve. With a final, lingering look at the serene water, he took a deep breath and stepped forward. Each step away from that bench was a step toward a future defined not by the betrayals of the past, but by the hope and possibility of genuine happiness. A future where he, his children, and even the promise of a blossoming relationship with Vivian could forge new beginnings amidst the remnants of yesterday. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.